Hey guys, it's Brian. I'm back in the garage again today. Today we're going to go over installing bearings and seals in your crankcase house. Hey guys, so your engine's disassembled. It's time to replace the bearings and seals. You've got the right video for that. And hey, I want to tell you a few things in advance. One is that I was actually building two motors at the same time, and I took clips from both motor rebuilds in order to sort of make a compilation video showing you guys all the procedures and techniques that I use in order to replace the bearings and seals in these two CR85 motors that I was building. In addition to that, I use timestamps once again in this video, so if there's something you feel like you don't need to see, you can look in the description and move around as needed. So if you need to skip something, feel free. Admittedly, this video is a little bit long because I showed two different techniques for installing bearings, and it can be a little bit lengthy, but I wanted to show you guys everything. Sometimes I'm challenged by, make the video short and easy to digest or give you all the information, but my personality is one that just likes to not skip a step. I followed the factory manual very closely in this video, so if you have a Honda service manual for your CR85, the procedures that I do in this video basically follow those procedures, so you won't be confused if you decide to use a factory shop manual in addition to watching this video. Oh yeah, one other thing I want to mention to you guys up front. So if you've taken your motor apart, I would strongly recommend that you take photographs of every single bearing and seal that you take out of your motor, preferably from multiple angles. And you can see here that I use a lot of pictures of these bearings that are in these crankcases because there are different heights and orientations of the bearings, and it's easy to forget how they originally came out when you're trying to reassemble them. So I strongly advise anyone attempting this kind of job to take pictures of all of the various bearings and seals in their crankcases before they start removing them. Once they're out, you have a stronger opportunity to make a mistake down the line. So take lots of pictures, you'll be glad that you did. With that said, I'm ready to go to work if you are, so let's tear right into it. So when it comes to removing seals like crank seals, I have been using this tool for a long time. This is a chisel that I ended up changing the profile of to relieve Zeus fasteners on a race car. And I basically filed this thing down to be the same contour as the inside of a Zeus fastener. And anyway, that's what I have used to remove seals. There's not any real trick to removing seals, but you just don't want to mar surfaces as you pull them out by like levering your wrench against the metal surface. So just be cognizant of that. Put a rag or something on here so that you don't end up damaging your metal faces. The same thing goes for the surfaces around. This one has been actually kind of abused a little bit. Someone took this seal out and really manhandled it. There's a lot of notches. So I just take the paper towel basically and lever it up against this. And really popping out seals is no big deal. Just kind of get in there, pull a little bit on one side, pull a little bit on the other, and out they come usually without too much drama. That's one. That's the crankcase seal. That's probably one of the tougher ones to get out. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in pulling out these seals because it's pretty straightforward. It's just a little bit of finessing and pulling up. So that's the main one, the crank bearing seal. Here's one that goes to the kickstart, and I'll just show you how to do that one real quick and then we'll just move on. This one doesn't have a metal surface that I'm levering against, so it's not really at risk of damage like the other ones were. So again, I just push down. And usually these things come out without any trouble at all. So that was pretty straightforward too. So taking out seals, pretty easy. To me, the easiest way to get these bearings out of these crankcase halves is with heat. And I'm using an oxyacetylene torch, but you can also use something like one of those propane torches that a lot of people use for camping. That works just as well. And be careful not to overheat the cases, just enough to get the bearings out because you don't want to warp the crankcase by overheating it. If you happen to have a stuck dowel pin in one of your crankcase halves, this is the easiest way to get it out. So apply some heat, not too much, don't go crazy. Then what I do is I take an Allen wrench that fits just inside the hole of the dowel pin and then compress my vice grip around it and then twist. It comes out usually real easy this way. Not all bearings will come out using heat, so you'll need a bearing puller to use it. You tighten down the collet and then connect this inertia hammer and give it a nice whack and it'll come out. But not all bearings on a CR85 are intended to come out. This one. This bearing too is not supposed to be removed. It is the bearing that holds the gear selector drum. I made a mistake by pulling both of those out, so I'm going to have to come up with some creative ways to reinstall those bearings. This is one of those things that reminds you need to read the manual before you start tearing bearings out. I've never taken apart an engine where every bearing wasn't replaceable, but in the case of the CR85, this bearing is not supposed to be replaced, so we're going to have to come up with a tricky little solution to fix that. Oh well, we'll figure that out. Let's go on to the surface plate. All right, so the bearings are out. Now we need to prepare the case halves. The case halves need to have smooth mating surfaces in order for the gaskets to seal correctly, and I got some great tricks to show you how to do just that, so let's get back to the video. So I've been using this piece of flooring tile. It's the same thing I use on the floor of my garage, and it works great as a surface plate. So I take my 320 grit, just lay it on there really, and then you just stroke the face of the case across the sandpaper. It's super easy. I'll show you. Pretty much see that most of it's come off already. A little bit over here still. You can see it's made a big difference. Got most of that off. This is the other side. That's done. So you see there's a lot of dust left behind in there, some grit, and this is a good time to clean everything up. So nothing super fancy about washing these cases, just Dawn dishwashing soap and water and just a little bit of elbow grease. Once you're done washing the cases with soap and water, you need to go over the bearing surfaces with something like acetone to make sure that they're very clean and there's no interference when you drop those bearings in. Hey, so I want to jump in here real quick and share something with you. I used two techniques in this video to install bearings into the crankcase halves. And these are two popular techniques. One involves using heating of the crankcases, the other involves cold press, which is the style that's recommended by the factory service manual. I went over both. If for some reason you know the style that you want to employ to put your bearings in, feel free to skip ahead or skip back, however you want to do it, in order just to watch the section that you want. Or if you want to compare and contrast the two different styles, you can do that in this video. Personally, I prefer the cold press method, even though I have done more work with heat in the past, but I'll get to some of the reasons why I'm moving away from that as you watch the video. So let's just get back to that, and you can decide for yourself how you want to do your bearings. So the cases are clean, and I've got them now on my welding table. You're supposed to get these up to about 300 degrees, but I've been doing it enough that I can kind of gauge about how long to do it in terms of how much heat to get in there before the bearings will fall in. I take the bearings and I freeze them overnight, and then when I bring them out to the garage, I put ice in there. That keeps the bearings cool while you're getting ready to do the service on them. This is the way that I do it, and I think it works pretty good. So let's get over to the case and get a little heat going on that and start dropping some bearings in. Okay, that went in nice. I found that once the main bearing goes in, the other bearings usually are warm as well, go in fairly easily, so you don't need quite as much heat for the secondary bearings like these transmission bearings. Let's see. Nope. Back to the cooler. Once we've got those bearings in on the one side of this crank half, we need to put them on this side. So that little sucker goes right there. Cup actually just literally fell in. All right, so now we repeat the same process on the left side crank half. I don't love doing this kind of work, frankly. It always makes me a little uncomfortable. This transmission bearing has a seal on one side, and you always want to make sure you get that the right direction. So one thing I've been finding myself increasingly dissatisfied with is using heat to install bearings. So here's what I don't like about it. First of all, it's not called for in the manual. Secondly, I always feel like this sort of mild sense of panic to get everything done quickly. So when you use heat to heat up this aluminum area here to seat the bearing, the aluminum of course expands, and the bearing, if you do like most people, you put them in the freezer, and if you leave the bearing in the freezer for a long time, then the bearing might contract, you know, a couple of thousandths or something. So in theory, if you can expand this and contract the bearing, it should fall in fairly easily. The problem is that you have to work super quickly in order for the whole effect to work. And I just don't like it. I don't like being rushed to do that kind of work. You got to put down your torch. I have actually dropped my torch on the floor before in the process of trying to do this really quickly. So I'm developing a new idea to something. So I taped two bearings together. All right, so I got my cold bearing here and the case half. We're basically going to put that sucker right in that hole, and then put my double bearing press on top, and I got a block of wood on the back side here to support it, and stick the whole thing in the vise and see if we can press in that bearing. Okay, so what I did last time was I gave it a little motivation with the hammer, and then I also put some torque on the vise to press the bearing, and it seemed to work pretty good. So let's see how it goes with this one. Close to fully seating this bearing, and I just want to align it a little bit better. Feeling pretty close to seated. Yeah, it always changes tone a little bit when you get fully seated. Sounds right to me. The next ones we're going to put in are these two bearings in relation to the transmission. It's hard to film the pressing process. Basically what I'm doing is taking the old bearing that I had that went in there, lining it up like this, and then putting it in the vise and then pressing against this threaded rod. You can always put the bearing in a little cockeyed doing that, so you've got to watch it. If it doesn't go in easily, take it out and start over. But so far this has worked pretty good, and I just like not having the flame everywhere. So I just put this bolt in, took the old bearing and pressed this vise and pressed the bearing in. I like this system a little better than using heat because I can feel when that bearing is seated. All right, so we've got the bearings in with the exception of the no-no bearings, the ones that I should not have taken out. So I'm going to show you my little sneaky techniques that I came up with to install these bearings that you should not take out. So just keep in mind, the bearings that I'm getting ready to install should never have been taken out in the first place. Just want to let you guys know that if you're working on a CR85, don't just go ripping into your crankcase halves, tearing out every bearing. Some of them are supposed to be pressed in there permanently and never removed. We're going to use a threaded rod. Bottom line on that, it's set perfect. So that worked. All right, so the next one we're gonna have to work on is the scary one, this shift drum bearing. Now that one doesn't have access to the other side. Let's just drill a hole. I have an idea. What I'm thinking about doing is putting this in the vise, because I think that's probably a flat surface. Put this in the vise, put the bearing in place, and then put the shift drum on top and press the shift drum down to seat the bearing. So I'm pretty sure that's gonna work. Let's give it a try. Put that on like that, and put the whole thing, as I mentioned, into this, and stick it in the vise. So off to the vise I go. So let's give it a whirl. Feels pretty solid. I think we got it. Huh, you'd think professionals were doing it. Worked great, huh? Okay, next we're gonna put in the crank seals. Again, using the crank seals that came in our wrench rabbit kit. So this is the left crank seal. And once this one's installed, it needs to be 2 millimeters below this face. Let me show you how to do that. Putting just a little bit of assembly lube on there. I saved my old seal, and I use that to press this one. It's real easy, just press them straight down. There we go. .01. Can't get any closer to 2 millimeters than that. Let's do the other one. Put a little assembly lube on there. Cool. Looks good. Back to the other side. This is the output shaft that we're going to do next. There we go. So one last seal, the one for the gear shift lever. Okay, nice and flush. Okay, so that is the seals for the crankcase halves. Next we're going to go on to the clutch cover. So I pressed in that bearing in the same way, which was using the vise and then a sacrificial bearing, the one that I had before, on top, and I just pressed it in. So I wanted to spend a second with you guys explaining the orientation of the bearings and the seals that go into the water pump. So bearing, the open portion of this seal goes against the bearing. That's the oil seal. And the water seal installs with the open portion facing you or facing the impeller shaft. So open face is what you will see. This is where the impeller goes. You'll see an open face when you're getting ready to install your impeller shaft through there. I just want to spend a little time explaining that to you because I have gotten this wrong before. All right, so now you got the orientation down. It's time to install those seals. So the first one is the oil seal, and I just used a socket that fits the inside dimension of the bore and just press straight down. It's pretty straightforward. So I just find the corresponding socket and press really hard. So this is real easy. Almost done, almost done. So this is the kickstart seal. Just press that in. I used my fingers in this case, it went right in. The final one is this oil seal for the clutch lever, which I also just used my fingers. So, all right. And that is it. Okay, so you knocked out the bearings and seals. Did you feel pretty confident doing it? I hope you did. I tried really hard not to miss a step. So hey, I just want to tell everyone once again, thank you so much for watching my videos. I really appreciate it. They get a little bit more traction all the time in this video series on the CR85 that I've been doing, along with some other stuff that I've been doing. By the way, I have a new project in the garage now, a pit bike that I'm working on, and with the help of T-Bolt, who's sponsoring this project, we're going to be tearing apart a CRF70, completely redoing the motor, turning it into a big bore pit bike. It's going to be really cool. I got a lot of great ideas for that, so stay tuned for the pit bike series that I'm getting ready to start. Another thing I thought I'd mention too is if you're done with your bearings and seals, you might want to check out this video here. That's for engine assembly of the CR85. That would really be the logical next step. And finally, just let me say thank you once again. It really means so much to me that you guys watch my videos. I love making them. It's a lot of work, but it is a lot of fun. They're very technical and the editing is incredibly tedious, but it is a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have fun in your garage.